one of my lecturers famously told me, hey, how are you going to get to Oxford? And he was a very nice guy. I said, well, I'm going to take the train from Paddington, right? So that's
Simple
what I
as
did.
that. Simple as
Simple as
that.
that.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Every summer I took the train. I went in there with a nice suit and, a shirt. And I just started shaking hands, started networking, started looking around the posh colleges, the posh people. I'm like, hey, these people are no different. I can think at this level. Now, I've seen the best drug dealers in the world. I've seen Nobel Prize winners. I've seen billionaire CEOs. The best people I've seen is this gut awareness they have. So if you walk into a room and you don't know anyone, you don't know the data, you don't have any intelligence in the field, but knowing what's going on, that to me is true genius. I always say to myself, life is a sales game, a risk game, and a numbers game. So always sell yourself, brand yourself, talk to people, always make the risks, and always do numbers. In terms of failure, is just a numbers game and iterations. I say in the journey, you got to be a yogi, but you got to practically execute like a Navy SEAL, and everything in between, you got to be Forrest Gump. Be childish, be foolish, and get rejected.
The Second Act platform always looks for people who really have different acts of life. And Pradeep, welcome to Second Act Podcast. When I heard your story, I really said to myself, you are just the right person, and your story will touch many lives. So, everybody who's hearing us and seeing us today, I'm very, very touched to welcome Pradeep on the other side. He will introduce a little bit about him just after I tell you what I've really been intrigued about his life. That he was a war refugee, a teenage gangster, and a high school dropout, an award winning scientist there on at Harvard and Oxford in just about 7 years. I think somebody who transitioned from being literally ruled out, or people have rejected him completely. He rejected probably himself completely, to where he became, and now he's the founder of a company called Donsfield. He also was, the vice president of a biotech company. I think this kind of life is unheard of. So, Pradeep, welcome. Please take the stage, introduce yourself, and tell us all about this. How do I start? I mean, I don't even know where to start, to be honest.
Yeah, sometimes I do this podcast. I don't know where to start, but I'm super excited. Thank you very much, Ashna, because this is the ideal podcast. When my team showed this to me, I'm like, wow, I really want to get to this podcast, particularly because also many of it listeners will be worldwide, but from Asian heritage. So I'm very focused on touching these people as well, because we're ingrained in certain cultural norms and systems that we need to challenge. So basically, who am I? My mom smuggled me in a truck, then on a fake passport to the UK. My mom is a very, very strong woman, very, very independent. I respect her a lot. So my aunties, actually. I grew up with my aunties, my mom, and my granddad in Sri Lanka up to 6. My dad was already, he transitioned to the UK. So we came here and we settled in what we call social housing, government housing in Northwest London. Uh, it turned out to be actually one of the main drug manufacturing hubs of London. So that happened. And then I was surrounded by the wrong people. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know who you don't know, right? Um, so I just got involved in gangs because they're around, and I was the only Asian kid. I fought back. I always fought back, and I got in trouble. Luckily, I didn't get into any legal troubles. And what happened was no one had education around us. No one had a career. It's fascinating now. I go to schools, and the kids are so well informed about careers and education, but we didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what university was for.
Yeah.
I dropped out at 16. I say this, I hate studying, but I love learning. I hate studying, but I love learning. The only thing I had in life is my uncle came from Sri Lanka at 15, when I was 15, and he said, listen, if you don't do anything sports wise, you're going to go to jail or you end up dead. So he gave me a pack of weights. I loved the weights. I started lifting. I started going to the gym. It gave me discipline. It told me how to set short, long-term, and medium goals. But until 16 to 21, I was working in supermarkets, pubs, and clubs, fashion houses, and so forth. But life was teaching me sales. 16 to 21, I was learning sales, learning people. Even if you couldn't go out of London, London is such a melting pot of people. I learned cultures. I learned interacting with people. At 21, fortunately, I got into a very serious gang fight, got hit on the head, for stupid reasons. I was in a 4-hour coma.
Wow.
And I woke up and I was like, there was no one. I didn't see God. I didn't see anyone spectacular. I just saw no one in the hospital room, no family, no friends, just me. So I said, look, life has to change. I had to do something for my family. So then I started doing what I call the numbers game. So I started phoning around. I made 3 phone calls. One lovely woman called Janet Hudson picked up at a local community college. She said, come in. What we do is having an access a foundation course. It gives you all your education in 1 year. So I done very well in that. And then I got into a degree program at the local community college, Polytech, we call it, at Westminster University. I done very well. And then I realized that this is my love of science and drug discovery. So then I tried to make some applications for PhDs. They said, no chance, right? From where you're from, your background. So then I was strategic. I made 13 applications, got accepted to Imperial College London. And then from Imperial, I made 47 applications. And finally, I got into Oxford for a PhD. Even that, the journey, I'll tell you different stories for it. Then at Oxford, I thrived. I just networked. I had confidence. There's one thing I would say in the introduction. I got rejected a lot, but I never rejected myself. So that's the mindset was there. I never rejected myself. I always thought I was good enough. I walked to any room with full confidence. And I said, bring on all the laughters, rejections. I'll still go through it because life was a journey now, a process. So in Oxford in 2017, I really worked 20 hours, 21 hours sometimes all night in the lab. I networked as well. I just didn't work. I networked. I learned culture as well. In 2017, I was the first one in history to win the British, European, and American Scientist Award. I discovered a drug for osteoarthritis. So I went from dropout to all this in 5 years. Then I told my professors, hey, look, this is what I love doing. I need 300 million because I think I can discover 3 drugs. They looked at me, they said, hey, this doesn't work like this. You're very talented, but it doesn't work like this. So I realized that because the life so far has been different, I realized that there's a set of parameters and a system that people teach us. We need these things to have rule and order and logic and career ascendance and so forth. But sometimes you need to poke it and challenge the system to see what the hell is going on. Because my professors, some of them Nobel Prize winners, they went through the same system. 30 years of research, doing this, coming back, getting some money, doing more research. I said, I don't have that time. I always say patience is a virtue only looking back, right? When you're doing it, you can't have patience. You cannot have patience because life is very short. So what I did is I made application. I dropped out of the traditional academia career. So this is my second dropout. And then I made my own applications. Dead broke, by the way. I qualified from Oxford. All my friends were having jobs. I was broke. I made my own applications, got the Fulbright at Harvard, got the EMBO scholarship, which is a French scholarship, a science scholarship to the French University Sorbonne, got another scholarship called the Daniel Turnberg Scholarship at the Hebrew University. So then what I done is I learned 3 techniques with 3 best people. So there, if you challenge a system and go abroad and find the people you want to work with, it helps you a lot. Even if you're broke or if it's suffering, it's only 18 months I suffered for. Then came back and I said to the UK, now look at this CV. Now can I have the money? They said, no chance. You're still, 28? So now people look at age and experience. So I said, where in the world do they need me? So I made 272 applications. The bigger the goal, the more rejections application. This was more than Oxford and Harvard, right? So 272 applications, and one guy finally picked up in China. He said, come over. This is crazy, your CV, come over. So I was 28 and I was already associate professor. I had my lab, and all the professors in the West told me it takes 30 years to discover these drugs. We done it in my lab in 18 months. I had the people and the money, and we published all 3 papers, discovered the drugs. So I was 30 and someone approached me saying, hey, you're talented, you want to do some business development. So now my third dropout, in my third act, I dropped out academia R&D and I went to business development biotech. I had no clue what I was doing, by the way. No clue. I didn't know what P&L was. I didn't know what EBITDA was. I didn't know all these business terms. I had no clue, but I knew I could learn and get around people, be adaptable and be charismatic and win people over and ask questions.
Beautiful.
And then I worked out a particular solution in terms of buying distressed assets during the pandemic and before the pandemic. The business grew for 80%. I think we IPO'd at 1.4, 1.5 billion, and we're doing very well. And then the pandemic hit. I was 32, I think, at that time. And then they told me, hey, Pradeep, and all the foreigners, you have to go to one hotel to eat. So I was in lockdown. I went to the hotel. I turned up. I was the only foreigner there, left in Suzhou. So I said, what the hell is going on here? And I was eating, and then I spotted all these people. These were like very old, sturdy, robust Chinese men with cigars and their laptops. I said, what's going on? I approached one of them, and I'm very social. I said, hey, how did you get out? They said, we own factories, we own the city, we own the government, we can do whatever we want. I said, what do you do? We sell online. I said, hey, I do business development now. Can I see your numbers? I'm curious. I saw $400,000 a day revenue, 200% ROI per day. And what they were selling boring products, toys, lint removers, metal spoons, hands.
Really?
I said, this is amazing. I said, can I do it? They said, no. So I had to win these guys over. So every day during the lockdown, during the day, I was doing senior vice president business development for corporate pharma and R&D. During the night, I was writing translation for Amazon customer reports and helping these guys trying to win them over. So I done that, and finally one guy said, hey, do you want to sell our toys in the UK because we don't have a UK market? I said, let's do it. So I put my own money. I started selling toys as a side hustle, my 4th act. And then that worked very well. So I eventually came back to the UK at 33, and I said, hey, this is my vice president of science achievements. Can I have a job now at the same level? And the UK, rightly, by the way, they said, hey, you're too young and overqualified now, right? All our vice presidents are 40, 50, and so forth. I said, what the hell is this system? I said, thank you very much. It's very important. Ego and identity, let them go. I said, I've done my part in science. Now it's my 4th dropout. I started my own business in e-commerce. So we do our business. We grew it now to 8 figures. We're acquiring companies. I love what I do now. I meet a lot more people. I think business is more challenging than science and R&D and anything I've done in the PhD. And also I do these podcasts to tell kids and everyone else, hey, I'm just a kid from a village in Sri Lanka. Grew up in Northwest London. I've done all this. I think you can do it as well, and you can do it better. So I try to go on this podcast and really, tell people this is what I've done through sheer failure and rejection. And it's very important because of the Asian heritage of the listeners, because we need to challenge some of our normal thinking. That's who I am. Sorry for the long introduction, but this is what it takes.
No, so, honestly, I'm really surprised at one end. I'm amazed at the other, astonished, shocked. I'm feeling so many emotions. Thanks for sharing this story, and very proud, by the way, in the end, to say, oh my goodness, it's a pleasure to meet somebody in my lifetime as creative, as disruptive as you are, to be honest. I mean, you've broken all norms for yourself more than anybody else. And, this is exactly what I try to do in Second Act, that we have limitless possibilities. All we need to do is just look up in the sky and we don't know where it's falling and just grab it. And I think that's what exactly you did. And I love it when you said that, it's more failures. I think it's only success stories that I hear, because they didn't seem like any failure story. It seemed like, oh my goodness, you reinvented yourself over and over and over and over again. And this is not possible in this lifetime. There must be something in your genes. Like you said, you had a fantastic mom. Tell me something about her.
Strong, independent woman. She didn't get the education. She sacrificed education. Her sisters got the education because she had to look after her mother, who was dying of cancer. But what I say now, when I look around at people, I have a philosophy. When people say don't judge a book by its cover, I said it's correct, but you should know what genre it is. You should know if it's fiction or non-fiction. You have to have a gut instinct of the person. And when I look at a person that is, look back at my mother and say, hey, let's look at her as a third person, great wisdom and awareness, right? I always say to people, awareness, conscious awareness has nothing to do with IQ or EQ or anything you can learn. It comes from experience and just knowing. So that's why one thing, if you ask my mother, wisdom and great conscious awareness.
So one thing that I want to ask you about your journey on getting into e-commerce, from what you were doing in your labs. How did you, is it called a growth mindset, an open mindset, a disruptive mindset? What kind of a mindset do you describe with yourself? Because transitioning from something so drastically different takes something. So how do you describe it?
So to be very raw and honest, what corporate biotech allowed me to witness is how finance and money and business works at different levels.
Right.
I was 30 years old and I was given a private jet and a chauffeur. I worked for it, right? Because we're doing so many deals flying in and out, and it wasn't a luxury. It saved time, right? So sometimes you're pinching yourself saying, what the hell am I doing from Northwest London in this plane, right? But then you fly and you do this and you realize that how money gives freedom, and freedom is very important because you can do certain things with it. I don't think money is bad. I don't think money changes people. It accelerates a personality, right? So if you're a gambler, it makes you bigger of a gambler. If you're an alcoholic, bigger of an alcoholic. If you are a womanizer, bigger womanizer. I'm saying manly things here. But, if you're kind and loving and nurturing, it makes you more kind, loving and nurturing and giving, right? So money allows you to do certain things. And I was very frustrated because I discovered all these drugs and so forth. I realized that the money will allow me, to give a better life for my family and close ones, but it will allow me to have the freedom to concentrate on certain things. So, hey, yesterday you phoned me saying, Pradeep, I can't get on this podcast. I'm like, cool. I have the freedom now as a CEO and as a person that is well off now compared to others, to say I'm going to move my schedule tomorrow to fit this podcast, because this podcast means a lot to me, because I want to reach people. So that's what it allows me to do. So this is what my mindset is saying, hey, you've got your PhD at Oxford and Harvard, you've got all this education, you've discovered the drugs, forget the ego, forget the identity, just do now what you can do to give freedom and to get freedom so you can give back. So I had to be, I say, selfish to be selfless.
I think that's a very important point that you have said here, to get selfish to be selfless. And I also believe in the financial freedom, and I promote it myself, especially for women, because I think we are always at the end of saying that I will handle myself the last. I am the last priority in my own life. And I think finance also then, makes you redundant in a way that you don't allow yourself to give importance, because you've never given importance to yourself. So everything in life takes a back seat. And this is exactly what I tell people, that for having the independence to be able to design your life, money has to talk that language for you. And
Absolutely.
I'm so glad that you can do it.
Absolutely.
Because there's so much that you've done so far. I want to know from you that what are some things that you've learned from life in this process? What are some things that you want to remind yourself every day? Because you're also experiencing a very dynamic life. I'm sure that it is not any way less stressful to you. It is different things and puts a lot of $1 million pressure on, I'm sure, somebody like you. So what are some learnings that you remind yourself of?
Yeah, so I have many learnings. Number one, I always say to myself, life is a sales game, a risk game, and a numbers game. So always sell yourself, brand yourself, talk to people, always make the risks, and always do numbers. In terms of failure is just a numbers game and iterations, right?
Right.
I always say failure is also a misconceived perception, right? And a rejection is a misconceived perception.
Yes.
So someone's perceived you because the wrong way, so you need to fix it. Your idea, your business plan, yourself. So you need to fix that. The third thing I say is, if the ego is like the skin and identity is your clothes. The ego cannot never go because it's your skin, it's who you are. It's actually an asset. I totally disagree that the ego is bad and what we've been told. The ego is you, and you've got to utilize it in big ways or small ways and control it. So if you're in a high power meeting or you're in where you're getting challenged, the ego has to come out. And so you got to use that ego, but control it. So always be aware of it. So I say, Pradeep, is this your ego talking or is this you? And then is the identity. So people, you've got to differentiate the two. The identity is the clothes you wear, saying, hey, this is the ego. I've got an education, but now I'm in a lab coat, so I'm a scientist. Oh, now I'm in a suit, I'm a businessman. Oh, now I'm wearing nothing, I'm a family man, right? So these are different identities that people are fixated on. So I need to say to myself, hey, what is the identity? What is the ego? What is happening in this room at this time? And the fourth thing is, everyone has potential for greatness, and you don't know. So treat everyone nicely because you don't know who's great. And how do I understand someone's talent or strength straight away? So I remind myself that every day. And I've got all these mantras, affirmations I do on a daily routine and so forth. So every day is a reminder day for me.
Very beautiful. There is so much that you speak, and I feel, oh my goodness, let me ask you this question or that question. So many things are coming into my mind when I'm hearing you, and it's fantastic. Thank you for sharing your life here, to be honest. When you were, you said at 21, of course, you were facing a different kind of life when suddenly, you said, oh my goodness, I didn't design it this way. I didn't want it this way. And you also said something like, you hate studying, but you love learning. Through that process of being reprimanded, being, being written off by the society, what were the emotions at that time you were feeling? And tell me a little bit about that, because it's very intriguing as a young adult.
Yeah, when I was looking back, I never had the philosophical nature or the insight to look at how society will look at me. Always probably naivety, saying, hey, and I think that's a strong point of me, because I don't care what people think or society thinks. At the same time, I think of what perception is, and perception is very important. But not caring what the reaction is two different things. Perception is important, but reaction is not so important, right? So you need to differentiate the two. So when I found out that perception in terms of education, in terms of what you can achieve and how you can achieve, so I went after those things. But reaction to what people say or society or the system doesn't matter to me. It never mattered, even as a young adult, even now as well. And I have to remind myself, because as we age, I think we accumulate more what I call dirt in terms of perception and reaction, right? And your friends, your families, or the news, or what so, tell you certain things, but you really need to shed that away. So those were the emotions going through me at the moment, and I had a goal and I went after it, and that's what I did, and I always still do it as well. But I tell people it's very hard because it's the emotional side, not the IQ or the physical or the genetic side. It's the emotional side. Your dependents, your wife, your kids, or your mom, your dad, your cousins, what they teach you, what pressures they put upon you, or your friends. So you got to be very careful who you surround yourself with, and what things you take into your mind, the data that comes into your mind, and then you be very selective of what you act on and what you think. I think that is the most important thing emotionally as well. And sometimes people will call you an arsehole. People will call you certain things because you're thick-skinned. But you got to have the ability to look at your loved ones or your friends saying, hey, I know what I'm doing and I'm doing it for you, but you don't see it.
Yeah, of course. I totally relate with you. But tell me, where does this wisdom come from for somebody who was going through life in a very different way than many other kids? Also, the upbringing, like you said, coming from Asia, from a developing country, it's always not so nice to be welcomed, especially in places in Europe or in the US. You're already feeling like one less pushed back. And then to get wisdom like this, how did that happen? Where is this wisdom coming from?
I think the journey helps. But one thing I say to people is that sometimes you can't experience lavish lifestyles or experiences, go abroad and stuff. The human mind is so powerful. Imagination is so powerful. Just sit and think and dream. Dreaming and thinking are free, right? They're free, right? You can dream and think for free. So sometimes I don't read as much as people think I did when I was young or now. I think. I think of the journey. I think of what's happened to me. I think about how I thought, thinking about thinking, how I can use that thinking to help people, and how those people will think about my thinking. It's a thought of deep reflection on how you accumulate certain things in life, and that's where the wisdom comes. And also, it's a lot of self-critical thinking as well. And you take that selfish ego and identity out and be very truthful to the truth and the fact in front of you. And I think that's where wisdom comes from. And I all my best, quotes or thoughts and everything come from just me walking around or sitting down and thinking. It doesn't come from external thoughts.
So, but did anybody mentor you along the way? Is there somebody that you always leaned back on, especially when you were in the down of like literally your life? Or if you were confused?
Yeah. So there's been 3 or 4 key people who are giving me opportunities who I always look for, not for mentoring, but for advice. But I've never been big on mentors. I've been on people who I look to at certain times and say, hey, I love this guy or this woman's personality or thinking or way of doing this particular thing. And I kind of merge it in. But you got to have a special cherry on top. All the ice cream flavors you can have yourself, but the cherry on top has to be you. Yeah, right. And you got to take all those expertise and personalities from different people you look up to, your role models and mentors, but bring it yourself. So that's been my philosophy. I've never looked upon someone for advice, and I advise people not to do so, because you don't want to be following someone or a certain group of people because you restrict your mindset to their data, to their experience as well. And you got to expose yourself to as many data points and experience that you can. So yeah, mentors are good, but they're not the absolute.
So are you not mentoring anybody as well?
I don't. You can tell yes or no, but off the cuff. I don't like to mentor people or coach people on a weekly basis, monthly basis. I like people to touch base on me. Hey, I'm on this situation. I haven't seen you for 6 months or talked to you for 4 months. What do you think? Hey, what do you think about this direction? I let go. I think that's great mentors, by the way, and great leadership. When you empower people, let them go. and give them freedom to make their own mistakes, get their own rejection, and they come back to you for feedback and let them go again. Because one day our kids, I've been lucky to teach very young adults and kids from a very young age. You realize that you cannot teach this mindset and they have to come to their own conclusion. The money, the experience, the family connection, the no family connection, the no money, all these scenarios means nothing unless the individual comes to their own conclusion on their spiritual journey, their wisdom, their career, and so forth. You really can't that click can't happen unless they do it. So mentorship, I think, is just let them guide them until they come to that point where it clicks.
Yeah, you're right, because everybody has their own life experiences and they become themselves only when, different things happen, which they can take on from there and not, like you said, leaning on somebody else's thought process. Everybody has to lead life the way the life comes to them and what they make out of it. So
and you want your mentees or followers, whatever, you want them to do better than you, right? So if I discovered 4 drugs, I want them to do 6 or 10 drugs, right? I say to people, true legacy is not who or you or what you leave behind, but who you or what you inspire to do a bigger legacy than you, right? That's true legacy. So so if you look to me or you or anyone, there's a bar there, there's a ceiling there, right? So you don't want that bar and ceiling there. You want to say, hey, it's just a glass ceiling, you got to break through it, because this is the only thing I have achieved.
Wow, beautiful. Pradeep, the more that you are talking about multiple acts of your life, the more I'm fascinated to go back to ask you about each act of your life. And what is the right way to start? Because I want to really know about everything. So from starting like a school dropout to being in, let's say, a remand home, or where did you go where did they put these gangsters? I'm not sure, like you were termed as.
No, luckily I didn't go anywhere. I'll just get into some little fights here and there. I didn't go to anywhere. I didn't get any trouble. Fate and destiny and luck made me choose the gym than going into certain fights that could have got me into serious trouble, but I didn't. So, in those early days, is about you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So if you're a kid growing in Mumbai or a village or somewhere, what do you know unless your parents tell you something, or society tells you something, or your friends tell you something? You're usually influenced by your friends, right? So so that's what I was. I just didn't know. But it doesn't the thing is, I always say to people, your biggest goals are directly proportionate to your self-confidence and self-esteem. If your self-confidence, self-esteem is not there, your goals won't be as big, right? So even as a kid, and this is the crazy thing, even as a kid, I was weightlifting. I wanted to win 6 gold medals. They asked me why. I said, Steve Redgrave, Olympian rower, has 5. So I had no genetic potential to go into the Olympics, but as skinny Asian kids, I won some regional shows. When I was at Oxford, I said to them, hey, I want 3 Nobel Prizes. They said, why? I said, Marie Curie has 2, right? Luck and base and discovery didn't maybe not allow me to have Nobel Prizes. We don't know what the 4 drugs I discovered will do. But I won the British, European, and American awards, right? Wow. So I always say about, even if you don't know, you got to dream massive, because you end up somewhere there. You will never surpass your wildest dream, but it has to be so big. So growing up, even in any situation, I always had big dreams, aspirations. I always thought to be the best. When I was doing ninjutsu, I wanted to be Japanese grandmaster, and I was not even Japanese. And I was like 12 years old. I was doing research on how to go to Japan and become grandmaster and so forth. I had no idea, and I quit ninjutsu after 4 or 5 months, right? So that kind of thinking has always been there, to be great and to have a legacy. And I don't think you teach that. I think somewhere it's in between, but everyone wants to be great, but you got to work on your confidence, self-esteem, because the goals are big. So I think that was there from a young age. And then I realized, how do I tap into this? And education was one way.
Beautiful. So, of course, every youth at some point in time loses the track. And you rightly said that friends are that core, of our universe, because of whom either we go very far or we also dwindle and experience a lot of things. Not right or wrong again, because again, that's a phase of life everybody should experience. But now looking back, what is it that you want to tell the youth who probably have got into wrong hands or did something, or, which is not the perfect life for them?
I think three things. Number one, your potential is greater than you think, right?
Yeah.
Number two, be very careful of your friends, because they're not there for your lifetime, right? Your friends are not your family, right? You have to start cutting the ones who are not very good. And that comes from deep reflection, right? At the moment, I only have two friends. I'm very friendly, I'm very helpful, but I'm very careful with friends. I have two friends I talk to every day about money, wealth, success, the same mindset, and that's it. And number three, I keep telling the youth is that you got to start playing the game and just getting in there. I think nowadays, particularly with social media and the influence, you see perfection too quickly.
Too much.
And perfection, I say, does not exist, but is a series of failures and risks, right? So getting there is something I think the youth have to look at very critically and say, hey, it's a series of failures and risks. I'll give you an example. So my Instagram has never been the best. So one of my friends was like, hey, why is your Instagram not this and that? I said, hey, what they were looking at is multi-million-dollar YouTube and Instagram stars with perfect, cameras and stuff. But we have iterations, and our social media is getting better. So I'm very confident I get to a point where it's good, but those things have to be looked up on very carefully, because sometimes the youth, particularly these days, look at certain things and say, hey, I can't get there, because they're looking at perfection too much. And most of the time, what they're looking at is actually totally fake.
If somebody looks at your life, Pradeep, from a distance, they don't know the struggles behind it, neither do they know what you've gone through. At social media handles, we do put up the best moments, the best pictures, the success stories, so to say. So that's what even people will look at you and say, oh my goodness, at such a young age, if Pradeep can do it, I don't know how to get there. So I'm feeling one less, because I don't think I have the capability, or maybe the circumstances don't help me, or my resources are not enough. So what do you want to tell them?
Yeah, well, that's why I do this podcast. I make sure the podcast there. I didn't have much resources. I didn't have much circumstances, but that didn't limit me to actually create the resources and circumstances in my head. I don't think it's a case of being having resources, but it's having a case of being resourceful, right? So what I did, one of my lecturers famously told me, hey, how are you going to get to Oxford? And he's a very nice guy. I said, well, I'm going to take the train from Paddington, right? So that's what I did.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Simple as that. So I didn't have much resources. No one went to Oxford. I took the train. I literally, every summer, I took the train. I went in there with a nice suit and, a shirt. And I just started shaking hands, started networking, started looking around the posh colleges, the posh people. I'm like, hey, these people are no different. I can think at this level, Every book, by the way, every book you can read is the same book in Oxford. They still do clinical medicine. The same book they use at Oxford is they use at any other university or library. So the knowledge is there. but it's a restriction of the system. You think you can't get there because the levels are too big. So I tapped into the knowledge and I walked in there and I made myself saying I'm good enough. Same thing, by the way, at Harvard. When I was at Oxford, they said, hey, don't go to Harvard. All these Chinese Americans and Chinese people come in and they work 20, 30 hours. I'm like, huh? They can't work 20, 30 hours, right? I have 24 hours. So I saved my scholarship money up from Oxford. I took a plane to Boston. I landed for a conference. I stayed at a hostel. Same thing. I went around. I said, hey, these people are no different. I asked questions. I met professors. I told them. They're like, what the hell is this kid? Eventually, one guy recommended another guy. Then I used them to write for the Fulbright. I ended up at Harvard. So even if you don't think you have the resources, you know, your perception and your mantras and your affirmations and how you visualize and put yourself in circumstances is very important, because then if the mind sees it, you will do it, and it's not airy fairy. You do it, but also you got to have practical execution as well. I say in the journey you got to be a yogi, but you got to practically execute like a Navy SEAL. And everything in between, you got to be Forrest Gump, be childish, be foolish, and get rejected.
Yeah, that's
So
very
you need all those aspects.
very beautifully put. Thanks for that. But you also authored a book, right? Or did you author more than one book?
Oh no, I authored one book. There's another book I'm writing, but it's been on standstill for some time. So it was about gut health. We're doing some research about gut health. And I wanted to dispel some myths. And also I wanted something very, very simple so anyone in the world can read. And I think we put it at 99 cents so anyone can download or get the book as well. So yeah.
So tell me about it. So for me, gut is literally your sixth sense. That's how I also use a very strong term with my children saying, what's your stomach saying? And anytime they're stuck in life, I say, what's your stomach saying? So literally, is the book about that? Or is the book really about the gut health?
Oh no, it's really about the gut health because as a scientist, I wanted to author a book. But you're right. There's I'll try to describe this. Knowledge is like dots, right? And then intellect is lines connecting the dot. And those are the two things that you see in some of these images. And knowledge is dots and intellect is the dots connected by line. I made a third image, right, called awareness. So you have the knowledge and the dots connecting the intellect, and then you have a circle that's been broken up, right? And I deliberately made that circle broken up because the breaks allow data to come in, right? And real awareness, I say, and I've seen this on very few people in this world. You got to understand, Archana, I've seen the best drug dealers in the world. I've seen Nobel Prize winners. I've seen billionaire CEOs. The best people I've seen is this gut awareness they have. So if you walk into a room and you don't know anyone, you don't know the data, you don't have any intelligence in the field, but knowing what's going on, that to me is true genius, right? Without no past experience or data, but you know the room and you know. So that awareness, I think, comes from what we call gut, but I don't know where it comes from, but I think that gut feeling is very important and that awareness is very important.
So do you work on your self-awareness, or does self-awareness come over with your experiences? What's your thought on that?
I think it's a bit of both. I don't actively go and work on self-awareness. I think if you concentrate on the journey and do hard things and fail a lot, I think self-awareness and self-reflection comes. Self-reflection is very important. You got to be very critical with yourself and critically think, why am I thinking this, right? And the second part of what I work on is my mantras and affirmations in the morning and at night, because that puts my mindset in a certain way for the day and night as well. So that might be affecting my self-awareness.
Tell us all about your affirmations and mantras, and we all need it in this world, to be honest.
Yeah, so ever since I was 6, I don't know if my grandfather said this boy's a bit crazy. So I used to walk around. I don't know where I got it from, He said, I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest. So I have
That's
no idea
nice.
where I got that from. So I kind of said, I think 12, 13, 14, when I was weightlifting, I was saying that as well. So I kept saying myself, I'm the greatest, or I'm wealthy, I'm happy. Those are the things I am, because it's a state. And I do that before bed, before wake up in the morning. And also on these podcasts, I'm very honest. I have a cup of coffee in the morning, and sometimes I play music, sometimes I don't. But I walk around for 20 minutes, executing, visualizing the meetings, executing, visualizing my goals, executing, visualizing a life I want to live. And I'm visualizing that. I'm literally acting it out. So for me, it's acting out. Maybe a handshake, or maybe talking or rehearsing the meeting, maybe getting on that plane or getting on in the car, or giving a present to my family members that means a lot to them because I worked hard. All those things emotionally, I'm setting myself up, and it's worked for me ever since I was a kid, because then I told you, thinking and dreaming is free. So now I've thought and dreamt, and now it's in my head. Now I can execute.
So nice. Yeah. I'm a total believer of affirmations. But of course, my kids challenge me sometimes to say, oh, it doesn't happen this way just by thinking it doesn't happen. And I think it does,
But
right?
no, but they're right as well. But again, it's really hard. It comes back to that saying, you got to have that ability to do it, but the practical execution and failures and risks come as well, right? The problem is people think if I do affirmation mantras and I do one or two tries, it will never come. Those affirmations and mantras are there to kind of reassure and affirm your rejections and failures. So I had to go through 272 to become VP and associate professor. What made me do those is those affirmations and mantras, because I was like, hey, next time I can do this. Next time I can, if I say this in an interview or do this. So those were the things. So you need both. And people, I think, don't do this or do this and don't do much of the rejection or failures. And then, it's not all working. Forget it.
So, but like, I'm sure that there must be times that you must be giving up on a situation or feeling in a way that, okay, I need to give up because it's not working out despite everything. How do you handle something like that?
It's strange because the bigger life goals I've never given up on, because it usually I've worked out if the gut, I say desires are not risk taken. If there's an internal desire there, an internal, I don't like the word passion, because I think passion is actually a very um, loosely used term. So desires are not risk taken, because if the desire is internal in your gut, the mind wants it. So if your gut and your mind wants it, you go drive for it, right? So I act upon those, and usually the bigger desires and goals I've always never given up on. Certain things lower down, like products in the business or certain relationships or friendships, I've given up on because they're not fruitful to me or the bigger goal. But the bigger goal, which is emotionally driven, I think has always been there. So I've never given up on those.
Wow, beautiful. So, but do you know that there is so much of discussion on mental health now? And I think the youth is more aware and they are really addressing it as well. What do you have to say about your mental health? Do you pay attention to it? Are you aware that, doing so many things can also cause a lot of stress and strain and, anxiousness and anxiety and whatever? Do you feel that?
Absolutely. First of all, I do think mental health exists and there's clinical cases of it. And I think people should be aware, not listen to certain people on social media and elsewhere to say that they don't exist. If you do feel it, you go get help. And I think it's very important, especially for men, because it's a disease. It's something biological going like diabetes, cholesterol, and so forth. And if you get help straight away or quickly, you can defeat it. For my personal mental health, yes, there's been times when high and low, but exercise, positive affirmation mantras help me a lot. Being Not being around toxic and suffocating people, which I haven't been around for now 25 years, helps a lot. I'm very, very ruthless when it comes to people. I cut them out. I'm very, very ruthless in terms of situations that are not beneficial for me. I cut them out as well.
Very nice.
And you got to be ruthless, because you got to push yourself first, because again, you got to be selfish to be selfless, right? And I've been happy and jolly in the worst of times, because I done those things, and I was ruthless in terms of chasing my dreams and my desires. So that's, if you chase those things, I think you can go through hell. If you try to satisfy people and also chase your dreams, you'll be in hell.
Yes, lovely answer. And thanks that you acknowledge it, because I think, like you said, there are many people who are disputing it as well. And I think we need to pay attention to mental health as much as the other parts of our body, the physical health, so to say.
And the scientist hat comes on. It's crazy. 2,000 years ago, we didn't know what diabetes was, but you and I, we come from a heritage that suffer from diabetes and cholesterol, right?
And it's in
Now we
this
know.
article in India, the paper said diabetes in the youth of India is growing rapidly.
Okay. Now imagine going to the youth and saying, hey, don't take metformin, don't take insulin. Diabetes doesn't exist. It's a fallacy. We didn't have it 2,000 years ago. Let's all not, it doesn't make any sense. So that's the same thing with mental health. It's always existed. Our medicines are getting better. Our research is getting better. In 500 years or even 200 years, they're like, what were these people thinking about? This was a serious disease, a serious set of diseases that could have been stopped, right? So that's the same scenario. And it dumbfounds me that people dismiss it, because I think soon, in a couple of hundred years or soon, they'll be like, whoa, these are very, very treatable and preventable things.
So in the middle of all this, where there is emotional health, mental health, there is also, that we put self-awareness in place, and then there is an AI, there is robotics, there is, technology, which is getting improvised every day. Where do you see this going?
Let it all come. You and I can only control what we control. That's all we can do. You and I can only control our own fate, destinies. Only real thing we can control is our thoughts, and our thoughts become our actions. So let me concentrate on my thoughts and my bigger goals and my giving back. And whatever comes to the world, whatever other people are doing, let me adapt and go around them and work together. That's all I can do. So the big questions, the wars, the peace, the AIs, yeah, I'm intrigued and I know about it, but really, what can we do, right? But go along with it and help and contribute. So this is why, again, I say to the youth, when you have money, when you have wisdom, when you have it all brings about influence. And when you have education, influence is what you need to have, or status, to have an impact on these bigger questions. If you don't, you can't control it. Just work on yourself to come to a point if you want to have influence.
Yeah. And what do you have to tell to the Asian kids who are trying to settle abroad and who are fancied by the European and the American culture, who don't want to stay in their own countries? And how do they need to adapt themselves when they are in an still, I would say somewhere still discriminated in many ways?
If you want it, go abroad. You got to listen to your gut and desire. Settle abroad. Understand that it'd be helpful if you have education and special techniques and talents that you can give to a certain society, or even if you start a business. Understand that in some of these countries you can succeed, but you need to understand the culture, understand the way they think, and this notion that somehow, somewhere, everyone has to accept you is wrong, right? You need to accept them and accept their environment, culture, and blend with them, right? And get along with them. And that's the most important thing. And notice that certain things and resources will not be available to you, no matter what they say, no matter what's happening. And you got to work for it and earn for it and find a way around it. But if you want it, you can succeed. But you can't do too much on your weaknesses. You can only maximize your strengths. So understand your strengths and utilize them, particularly in a foreign environment.
Very nice. Very nicely put, by the way. So, Pradeep, this is a Second Act podcast. So, what does the name Second Act bring to you?
Second act, it means for me, a second act, a third act, a fourth act. It means a series of failures or a series of risks that you've taken to come to understand that you have bigger desires and goals.
And that you have bigger acts to do, right?
Okay, I found this on the web for a series of failures. Or
Sorry. When I say series, Siri comes up for some reason.
Yeah, technology. Technology, you see.
You can cut that off. See, I have no control of these things.
No, let it be there, but it's interesting. I mean, it's quite interesting. But okay. So anyway, okay, I do like that when you say that it's a series of failures and desires that we build from there. So my next question is, so is there a second act that you are still working on, or you experience a second act from your failures that came out?
So I'm at the moment concentrating on the business. No, I said I'm on my fourth act. You never know if there's a fifth act. And for me, you got to listen to your gut and say, hey, what is my gut or my heart and my mind? All those three things align. What are they yearning? What's the yearning? And if you go after the yearning, you'll have your second or third or fourth act. So at the moment, my heart and my mind and my gut is yearning for the business and growing it. So I can't foresee a fifth act, but you never know. But I tell people, for your second act, just be aware of the opportunities and also what your gut and your mind and your heart is yearning for.
Beautiful. Okay, so we have some rapid fire questions now, quick ones. So abreast yourself, get ready. Your favorite book?
Oh, Second Bounce of the Ball, by someone Friedman.
What does it say?
It's about a Jewish immigrant that came in and started his own PE firm, one of the first private equity firms, and how he grew it. It's a very different book. It's about business and so forth. It's something I picked up only 2 years ago, but it shows you that there's always a second bounce. So the first bounce is always big, and the second bounce is a lot smaller. But the second bounce is where the iterations happen and you learn a lot. It's more of the reflection of the life, and the second bounce is what I liked.
Wow, very relatable to second act, I would say then. I would pick up this book too. Thanks for saying. Okay, so one movie that intrigues you.
Oh, one movie. Any movies that there's a lone hero. So John Wick or Equalizer or someone, because I'm fascinated, particularly with the latest movies, these action heroes, they're effortlessly going through fights or life or decoding certain things. And I always say that you are the hero of your own movie, right? And you got to be kind of that hero and say, hey, how do I effortlessly go through life being a hero? And there's every kind of choice or every certain aspect is like a new angle on the movie, a new kind of scene, and the audience is viewing it, or God is viewing it, or whatever. So yeah, those are the kind of movies I like. There's the kind of action man or James Bond kind of Equalizer, John Wick movies where you're the hero and you're going through all this hardship, but it's effortless.
If I was 20 years old today,
I'll do everything against the same.
oh, again the same. Oh my God. Okay.
Because I won't get to the point where I am now. I won't be exposing myself, because the question has to be, if I'm 20 years old with the same knowledge I have, or is it if I'm 20 years ago without nothing I've known?
There is no cue. It's just 20. So you answered it anyway. So you won't change anything. I'll take that for the answer.
Yeah.
If I am 50 years today,
have I taken bigger risks? Have I taken the biggest risks? I have. Yeah. Have I taken bigger risks?
my favorite quotation whenever I need to give gyan to somebody or to just pep themselves up.
Ooh. Favorite quotation. I have a lot of my own quotes.
Yes.
But one I really think I want as my own quote, but I can't because someone else said it, is the most dangerous men and women on this earth are the ones who dream with their eyes open.
Yes, absolutely. And you are the live example of that, of course. Okay, great. And so that one last thing you want to leave people who are hearing you and seeing you today.
Or just go after it. Life is a numbers game, a risk game, and a sales game. Sell yourself, brand yourself well, make sure your perception, how people see yourself, is good, because go after it, experience the dream you want, live it, take all the rejections as much as you can, and just keep going, and be very careful with the people you surround yourself with.
Beautiful.
These were certain things, but there's a lot more. But I truly believe if people want it bad enough, and if their mind, heart, and gut aligned, I think you go and get it.
So thank you, Pradeep. It was very exciting. I'm waiting to do in-person podcast with you when you're in India. You said
Please.
take a private jet and come here, so I'll be waiting for that. And you have been a very interesting podcast guest for Discover Your Second Act, because with the kind of life that you've led and always taken life head on, I think that's how I would like to put it. So
it's fascinating because this was I was so excited for this podcast, and I just reflected now. Normally I go and switch the phone off. Normally Siri doesn't come on, but it's like second act. I was there. All these little things been coming at me, but I've kept going. So I was like, this is exactly what the podcast is about.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad that you say it and you experience it. And I'm so happy that this happened as well, because when everything goes on, let everything, like you said, come on, everything come together. It doesn't matter. I'm here. I'm going to experience everything. So I think this was as beautiful as that. So definitely this is not the last time that we are talking. I think there's a beautiful learning experience that I got. I want to enhance it even further by being in touch with you. So we will be, of course, doing this very nicely, collaborating on this podcast. And I want more and more people to hear about you and your story. So thanks again.
Thank you very much. Nice. Thank you so much.
So this is yet another incredible episode of Discover Your Second Act. I'm hoping that as me, you are feeling very, very excited, enthusiastic, and learned about all the nuggets that came out. So follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and of course, until next time, keep discovering your second.